Welcome back, guys. It's time for How to Play MTG Better Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1, you might want to watch it first, otherwise these aren't really in any particular order. So, this video's topic is watching what's in your opponent's hand, because you can gain some really good, insights about what they're going to do or what they potentially could do just by watching what's in their hand. And I don't mean like trying to cheat or use mirrors. I mean, well, you'll see what I mean. Now, this whole technique relies on two things. One is how many cards are in your opponent's hand. Now, keep in mind, you can ask at any time how many in their hand. You could just say cards in hand, which is how all the pros do it if they're lazy and boring. But however you want to request it, you can say how many cards are in your hand, and they have to tell you and show you to prove it. So if you're ever curious, just ask. It's also a good way to see if they're holding 8 cards, which you should also try to catch, but that's a different video. And besides the count in their hand, you want to try to watch where they're going with cards that they pulled off the top of their deck. So if they just drew a card and they put it in the very front, which as you're looking at it would be the far left of their hand, if that's how they do it, if they just keep it there, that's, it's bad technique on their part, but that's what most people do. They just keep them in their hand in the order that they drew them. I purposely arrange them either completely randomly if I'm playing a pro, or by land in the back, then creatures in the middle and spells in the front, and then the next game I mix it up. I'll mix up those categories. So if they think they've got me figured out, it's actually detrimental because I'm moving the cards around. So that's one little clever bonus tip. But yeah, if you can watch what they're drawing, where it went, and whether or not they played it that turn, or if what they drew is still in their hand, you can make a whole bunch of different projections. So the first little section here is, did they miss a land drop? Did they miss a creature drop? So the first one is really obvious. Did they purposely not put in a land on their turn at all in any of the phases? Because that pretty well indicates that the rest of their hand is not land. So that tells you if they have 4 cards in hand, they're all either like creatures or spells. Now that's super, super obvious, but if they do pull a card, and then before it even hits their hand, they directly play it on the table and it's a land, well, then you know they're still not holding any land and they still have 4 spells. So you know that they're not holding 3 lands in 1 spell and you're clear to attack. So that's a little tiny bit of an advantage. I have no idea why this is less obvious to people, but did they miss a creature drop? Let's say you're pounding them, mid to late game with like a 3/1 creature or something. You just keep hitting them and it's becoming a problem. They're getting really low on life points. During their turn, did they not summon a creature? Well, if they didn't summon a creature, it's probably because they don't have one, because it's getting really dire. Now, if you're hitting them for 1 damage and they have 25 life left, well, maybe they're just not bringing out a creature because they're waiting for a certain condition, like they gotta have 2 creatures hit the battlefield at the same time, or they have to flash in the creature for an ambush, or the creature returns another creature to their hand and they need another creature, so you can't guarantee that they don't have a creature, but if they're really getting pounded, they probably don't have a creature. So then watch what they draw, if they look very happy when they draw that card, and where that card goes in their hand. If they just put it directly into their hand and kind of shuffle them around and then drop a creature, they probably drew a creature. Because, they're at 7 life left and you're hitting them for 3 per turn. They really need a creature out. But if they missed an entire turn of summoning a creature, you can be pretty darn sure that the rest of the cards are not creatures. So all you have to do is constantly consider what would they have 100% for sure played if they had the card in their hand, and then you could start ruling out cards. And keep in mind, there's not that many cards in a deck, not that many individual distinct cards, and usually it's about half creatures, half spells. So if there's only about 5 distinct creatures, and you know that if they had an 0/5 wall they would have summoned it by now, then you know they're not holding a wall, which means, if they kept their opening hand, it probably didn't have no creatures in it at that time. It did not contain 0 creatures, it contained more than that. So you could think, well, what are the other 4 creatures in their deck? Maybe 5, maybe 6 if they mixed it up. And then you could probably pretty accurately predict what they're holding just based on logic. Like, would they have kept a 7 land hand? Probably not. They missed a land drop, they've got 2 cards left, they're probably creatures. Oh wait, except I'm pounding them with my creatures, they're getting low on life points. oh, those two cards must be sorceries or instants, or, enchantments or artifacts that they haven't had need to bring out yet. And even then, that's a little bit of a tip. If they would have brought out an enchantment that just sort of sits there and does something, they probably would have already brought it out by then. So between all the different distinct cards in their deck, in fact, the more unique it is, the better. If they did 20 spells, 20 creatures, it's a little bit harder. If they have 8 artifacts, only 12 spells, and we're talking 3 distinct sets of 4 spells, and then 5 creatures, it's going to be even easier for you to predict what they're holding. So if it always seems like your opponent knows exactly what you're holding, it's probably because they're analyzing what you played, what you didn't play, and when. Now, like I said, this only really works mid to late game. If it's early game and they saw you summon a weaker creature, that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't have a stronger creature. There could just be combos, or you're waiting, or they have board wipe. But late game, it's like, okay, everything's on the table. I'm almost top decking. You're just going to play your cards. You're going to play the creature cards when you get them, when you need to start swinging. You're just going to play the game, basically. There's no tricks, and there's no just soft decisions where you've got 3 identical creatures, so you just pick one. How would you know? So that little tip will build on to the future tips that I'm about to do and make you, like I said, seem practically telepathic to your opponent.